A week ago, 27-year-old George Nkencho became the 7th person in 20 years to die after being shot by Gardaí. His death sparked protests and tension in Blanchardstown in Dublin, and a Gsoc inquiry has been launched. So what's known about the circumstances that led to his death? Our security correspondent Barry Cummins reports.
This is George Nkencho 2 years ago at his mother's birthday party. This is George Nkencho on Wednesday of last week, walking in West Dublin, being followed by Gardaí who have been alerted to an assault. They are asking George Nkencho to stop, but he does not. It's here at Hartstown in West Dublin that just after midday on Wednesday of last week, George Nkencho came to the Eurospar behind me. He assaulted a staff member. Gardaí were called to the scene, unarmed officers. They saw that George Nkencho was carrying a knife. As Gardaí followed the 27-year-old, they were keeping a distance. They asked him to drop the knife and to stop walking, but he did not stop. George Nkencho came to live in Ireland 20 years ago when he was 7 years old, his family settling in West Dublin. This week, his sister Gloria spoke proudly about her big brother and also about mental health difficulties he began to suffer in recent years.
George was charismatic, he was sociable, he was popular, he was intelligent, he was caring, he was a protector, he was our firstborn, he was my brother. All he ever cared about was playing football and music. He used to love music. He made us who we are because we looked up to him and how much we loved him. I guess life happens and people go through things that they're not able to articulate or they're not able to explain or they're not able to, work through properly, and, a deep depression sets in. And they change, and it's like you see a person just change right in front of your eyes, a person you love, a person you know just change. And it's not like it's a sudden change, it's gradual. It'll be one thing here and then another thing there, and before you know it, that person that was so bubbly and was so sociable that everybody knew and everybody loved, you just see them suffer. I've never known a place, I've never known a world, I've never known an environment where I didn't have my brother. And now, here it is. This is my reality now.
It's to this quiet cul-de-sac at Manorfields Drive that George Nkencho came, arriving at the front door of his family home. It's about a 10-minute walk from Hartstown Shopping Centre. Along that journey, he was being followed by Gardaí. During that time, Gardaí were trying to establish who George was. They were asking him to stop, to put down the knife. When George arrived at his home, Gardaí didn't know whether he lived there. Based on their training, Gardaí could not let George enter the property. They were threatened with the knife and used pepper spray and taser, which did not work to subdue George. Currently, the law doesn't allow Gardaí to wear body cameras. The only footage I've seen of the moments 5 shots are fired was recorded by a passer-by from a distance on a shaky mobile phone. I can see perhaps 9 Gardaí close to George's house, with at least one Garda in the garden near George. 5 shots are heard. We now know that not all of those shots struck George. The Garda Síochána Ombudsman Commission is now investigating the shooting. As we filmed at the scene, Gloria was visited by the legal team now representing the family.
How are you, Gloria? How are you?
Solicitor Phelim O'Neill updating her on the Gsoc inquiry. This week, I spoke again with Gloria at her home. She's currently self-isolating as a result of the pandemic. Gloria, it's been reported that you opened the door, you came to the door in the moments that George was in the garden before the shots were fired.
I opened the door when I saw my brother first, and I said to the guards, "He's sick, move," and I wasn't allowed past the entrance, and I was pushed back in to my house.
Did you fear for your own safety at that time?
No, I didn't fear for my own safety. What made me afraid was when the shots came in through the house, when me and my two siblings were standing right behind the door.
And those shots were just a few seconds later or minutes later?
Just a few minutes later, they just happened, and me and my siblings were behind the door in the hallway when the shots were fired.
Gardaí at the scene were making decisions in real time. Part of Garda training is that a person who is a threat and is outdoors should not be allowed to enter a building for fear the situation may escalate and other people could be harmed. Fatal shootings by armed Gardaí are rare. In the last 20 years, there have been 6 other such fatalities. Security consultant Sheila Brady is a former Garda.
Speaking in general terms, these types of incidents, they're few and far between because of a range of interventions. We often hear graduated policing response. And what that is in layman's terms, or for the police officer that attends a scene, is them making a dynamic risk assessment at whatever incident it is, and then them trying to work out a range or a continuum of interventions that they may take on based on what's happening. But there's a lot in that, and yet it can happen over split seconds. Things like pepper spray or the taser themselves, studies have shown that they don't work in 100% of cases. Things like adrenaline, things like drugs, things like the reason what is kind of heightening somebody, what they're being driven by, all of those can impact. And also the technology can fail, or it can just not connect with the person.
With a fatal discharge of a firearm, people will wonder, could Gardaí not shoot somebody in the arm or the leg?
I think the nature of these incidents is they happen so infrequently. Our recollection or our relationship with them is often informed by Hollywood or the movies or things like that. Shooting somebody in the limb is much harder, especially if they're moving. And like taser, using the taser and the pepper spray, sometimes even if you actually did wound somebody, you may not mitigate the risk. So they're trained to target the torso because it's the largest target for them. And if they hit it, it's likely that they will mitigate the risks.
In the case of George Nkencho, it's now believed he was in the midst of a mental health crisis when he refused to drop the knife. An idea to have mental health crisis intervention teams working alongside Gardaí has long been mooted.
We have to recognise that very significant numbers of people that the police interact with do have mental illnesses or maybe in mental crisis in that moment. In 2009, a joint working group on policing and mental health called for a pilot of crisis intervention teams. That did not happen. And in 2018, the Commission on the Future of Policing found that recommendation had not been implemented, and it went further based on much more international evidence and said that we needed to establish crisis intervention teams in every division. And the idea then would be that you have psychiatric staff in police stations who can respond just as quickly as an armed response unit can, in tandem with them. This is not a criticism of the guards in any way, shape or form. It was not their job to do this. Guards do not want to be utilising lethal force.
Back in West Dublin, the Nkencho family have received racist, hate-filled material, which is now being investigated by Gardaí. And this as they attempt to deal with the shocking events of last week. How are you? How is the family feeling? How are you feeling right now?
Shocked, devastated, disappointed, sad, anxious. I could go on, but those are the feelings that my family are currently going through at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time.